The FBI is known as one of the most advanced law enforcement agencies in the world, often taking on the most dangerous and complex criminal cases. When a horrific discovery shocked the Galveston police, even seasoned investigators struggled to comprehend what they had found. Inside 3 trash bags placed in a container and tossed from a bridge, the body of a young girl was discovered. The tide had carried her to a sandbar in the Gulf of Mexico, where she was finally found. No one could understand how such a small child ended up there or why. The FBI was soon called in to assist, as the case presented more questions than answers. Finding out who the girl was and what had happened to her felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. One family, desperate for information, received the heartbreaking news that authorities could not confirm the child's identity. Confusion and disbelief set in. "What do you mean they don't have her?" one relative reportedly asked, unable to process the words. The investigation began on the night of the 29th of October 2007, around 10:30 p.m. Robert Spinn, a local fisherman, had gone out to catch flounder in Galveston Bay. As the wind picked up, the water grew too rough to see the fish clearly. He decided to move about a mile south of his usual fishing spot, somewhere he rarely went. Later, he would recall a strange feeling that something had led him there for a reason. After cutting his engine, Spinn anchored his boat near a small, uninhabited island. It was then that something on the shoreline caught his eye. A box sitting oddly against the sand. Curious, he pulled his boat closer and stepped out to investigate. When he turned the box over, it made a heavy, unnatural thud. The sound alone told him that something was terribly wrong. Inside, he found a black garbage bag. When he tore it open, he saw what appeared to be a small child's shoe, and at that moment, he realized the awful truth. He immediately called 911, Galveston County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher answered. "Yeah, I'm out in West Bay," Spinn said. "I think I found a body." He waited on the water until investigators from the Galveston County Sheriff's Department arrived, then ferried them to the remote island. There, police confirmed what he already feared. The box contained the remains of a little girl. Sergeant Mike Barry, who was just 90 meters away when he received the call, rushed to the scene. Over the radio, he heard the confirmation. "Randy, does it appear to be a child?" "It appears so," came the reply. For Barry, the discovery hit close to home. With 3 children of his own, he knew that any case involving a child's death carried a heavy emotional weight. What began as a fishing trip had turned into the start of a haunting investigation, one that would stay with everyone involved for years to come. Lieutenant Tommy Hansen, Sergeant Barry's longtime partner, felt the same determination to uncover the truth behind the child's tragic fate. Over his years in law enforcement, Hansen had seen more than his share of difficult cases, but crimes involving children always left a deeper scar. "No matter how long you've been doing this," he would later say, "cases with kids never get easier. They wear you down. You never become numb to them." The discovery had shaken the entire department. For a moment, even the most seasoned investigators felt the weight of what they were facing. But duty soon took over. The team pushed past their emotions and focused on the task ahead, finding out who the little girl was and how she had ended up in the water. Deputies combed the small island, searching for anything that might point them toward answers. Footprints, fragments of clothing, tire marks, anything that could help. Yet the scene offered few clues. The tide had likely washed away much of the evidence, leaving investigators to wonder whether the child's death had been the result of a brutal act or a tragic accident. Hoping for clarity, police turned to Dr. Stephen Pastilnik, the chief medical examiner. His role was to speak for the victim when she no longer could. After carefully examining the body, Dr. Pastilnik confirmed that the victim was a young girl, likely between 2 and 5 years old. His findings, however, revealed something even more unsettling. The child's injuries and the circumstances of her discovery suggested that her death had not been accidental. According to Dr. Pastilnik, every sign pointed towards something intentional, something deliberate. That conclusion changed everything. What had begun as a mystery was now officially treated as a homicide. And for the investigators in Galveston County, it became a mission not just to find the truth, but to bring justice to a little girl who could no longer speak for herself. Dr. Stephen Postilnick's autopsy soon revealed the heartbreaking truth. The little girl had died from blunt force trauma to the back of her head. It was the kind of injury that couldn't be explained by a simple fall. "Children fall all the time," Dr. Postilnick explained. "This wasn't that. The impact required significant force, a velocity strong enough to suggest she was pushed or thrown. This was no accident." With that conclusion, the investigation shifted direction. What had once been a mystery now appeared to be a deliberate act of violence. Detectives began to consider the unthinkable. They might be dealing with a murderer, perhaps even a predator. Yet, despite their suspicions, evidence was scarce. There was no DNA on the child's body, no identifying marks, and no personal belongings that might reveal who she was. They didn't even know her name. To find the person responsible, they first had to answer the most basic question: who was this little girl? "We had to give her a name," one investigator later recalled. "Once you can identify a victim, you can start tracing who they were last seen with. That's how you find the person who did this." Realizing the enormity of the challenge, the Galveston County Sheriff's Department reached out for help. They needed the expertise of investigators who specialized in crimes against children professionals with the resources and experience to navigate such sensitive cases. That's when the FBI was brought in. Special Agent Don Gay, who had spent years working in the Galveston area, quickly became the lead on the case. His deep familiarity with the community and his reputation for handling delicate investigations made him a natural choice. "When my supervisor asked if I wanted to take the case, I didn't hesitate," Agent Gay later said. "I know this area. I know the people, and as a father of young kids myself, I couldn't imagine not doing everything possible to find out what happened to her." From that moment, the investigation gained new momentum. What began as a tragic mystery on a lonely sandbar was now a federal case, one driven by a shared mission to uncover the truth and give a nameless child the justice she deserved. How could anyone do this to a little girl and then just throw her away like garbage? One investigator asked, echoing what everyone on the case was thinking. Among those deeply affected was FBI Special Agent Benjamin Stone, a veteran in cases involving crimes against children. He joined the team with a clear mission to discover where the girl came from and how her body had ended up in Galveston Bay. Agent Stone immediately began working with the U.S. Coast Guard to determine where the container holding the child might have been dropped. Could it have been thrown from a bridge, or perhaps dumped from a passing vessel? The possibilities were overwhelming. The theories were everywhere, Stone later recalled. "We were trying to figure out where she might have entered the water, but it was nearly impossible to pinpoint. With so much international shipping traffic moving through the Houston Ship Channel, she could have come from anywhere in the world. That's where we had to start, from nowhere." Investigators were certain of one thing. Somewhere, a family had to be missing a little girl. But when they checked local and national databases for missing children, there was no match. The child seemed to exist nowhere in official records. Realizing that time and distance were against them, the FBI decided to take the search global. The Galveston County Sheriff's Office could handle tips from the Houston area, but the FBI had the resources to reach far beyond state and even national borders. "We needed the media," one agent explained. "We needed to show her face to the world and ask for help. Someone, somewhere, had to know who she was." To that end, a forensic artist was brought in to reconstruct the girl's appearance based on the autopsy and recovered evidence. Slowly, the image of a bright, innocent child began to take shape. A little girl with soft blonde hair, blue eyes, and a pink shirt paired with a skirt and purple tennis shoes. She was no longer just a victim without a name. Authorities gave her one: Baby Grace. The name resonated across the nation. Baby Grace became a symbol of innocence, lost a child who now belonged to everyone. The Sheriff's Department held a press conference, displaying the small shoe found beside her body. Reporters captured the emotional plea as investigators promised not to stop until they uncovered the truth. "It might take time," one officer said, "but we're not quitting until we figure this out." They urged the public to call in any information, no matter how small, hoping that someone, somewhere, might recognize the little girl's face. "If we can put a name to this child," an agent explained, "then we'll know who was with her last, and that could lead us straight to whoever's responsible. No one discards a child like this. Someone knows something." More than 2 days had passed since the discovery of the child now known as Baby Grace. The Galveston County Sheriff's Department and the FBI were racing against time, united in one goal: to uncover her identity and understand why her short life had ended in such a tragic way. The autopsy had confirmed that Baby Grace died from blunt force trauma to the head. The question now haunting investigators was whether her death was the result of abuse. Was she a victim of long-term mistreatment? With countless ships passing daily through the busy Galveston waterways, the possibility that the child could have come from anywhere in the world made the search feel overwhelming. Yet, no matter how far the case stretched, those who worked on it felt personally connected. "Any way you look at it," one agent said quietly, "we all carry a piece of her with us." Determined to uncover her identity, the FBI released the forensic sketch of Baby Grace to the media, broadcasting her image nationwide in hopes of generating new leads. The response was immediate and emotional. Calls began flooding the hotline, hundreds of them within just 24 hours. Heartbroken family members, neighbors, and even strangers reached out, convinced that Baby Grace might be their missing loved one. The calls covered everything, one investigator remembered. Parents in custody battles, grandparents who hadn't seen their grandchild in years, neighbors saying, "I haven't seen that little girl next door in months." Everyone thought it could be her. What struck agents most was just how many young, blonde-haired girls around the age of 2 were missing across the country. It was a sobering reminder of how many families were living their own quiet nightmares. Then, on November 2nd, investigators received a local tip from nearby Lamar, Texas. A man reported that a little girl matching Baby Grace's description had lived across the street, but her family had suddenly moved out in the middle of the night. Detectives rushed to the home and, upon searching it, found discarded children's clothes and small shoes items that seemed eerily similar to those recovered with Baby Grace. But the family was gone, and no one in the neighborhood knew where they had gone. As officers followed that lead, another tip came in from a local hotel manager. She reported that a couple had rented a room there but hadn't used it for more than a week. The room contained belongings for a child, yet none of the other guests had ever seen a little girl. When investigators searched the room, they found children's clothing and a photograph of a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to Baby Grace. For a moment, it seemed like they might finally be closing in on the truth. Agents pursued the lead aggressively, tracking down the couple connected to the room. But when they located them, it turned out the child in the photo wasn't Baby Grace. Another dead end. Meanwhile, police managed to locate the family that had abruptly moved out of the Lamar home. That, too, turned out to be a false alarm. Each potential break in the case dissolved into disappointment. "We had to check every single lead," one investigator explained. "You couldn't skip one because you never knew which tip might be the one to finally tell us who she was." Despite their tireless efforts, the team found themselves right back where they had started, with more questions than answers, and a little girl still without a name. Across the country, families waited anxiously as DNA samples were compared to that of Baby Grace. Each one hoped for closure, praying that the unidentified girl was or wasn't their missing child. The FBI and local authorities received hundreds of tips, and every lead, no matter how slim, had to be followed to its logical end. Some seemed promising at first, one investigator recalled. But one by one, they all turned into dead ends. Then came a call that momentarily captured international attention. Authorities more than 5,000 miles away believed Baby Grace might, in fact, be a missing British child, 4-year-old Madeleine McCann. Madeleine had vanished from her bedroom in May of that same year while on vacation with her parents in Portugal, sparking one of the most widely publicized child abduction cases in the world. The possibility was too important to ignore. FBI agents contacted their international counterparts through legal attachés in Spain and Portugal to coordinate a DNA comparison. Within days, Madeline's DNA sample was sent to the United States and tested against that of baby Grace. The result was definitive. It wasn't a match. And neither were any of the other DNA comparisons from families who had come forward. There were so many unknowns in this case, one FBI agent said. It really was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Then, just as the investigation seemed to be stalling, a new lead surfaced, one that would finally give investigators a direction. 2 local fishermen called in with a tip. They had been fishing in the same bay where baby Grace's body was later found. A few days before the discovery, they noticed something unusual. While fishing at a boat ramp pier in the small town of Hitchcock, they saw an older model vehicle pull up, towing a small boat. A man and a woman got out, but what caught the fishermen's attention was that neither of them had fishing gear. Instead, they carried a large blue container onto the boat before heading out into the bay. About an hour later, the couple returned. The fishermen watched as the woman climbed out of the boat, visibly distraught, tears streaming down her face. The scene had seemed strange at the time, but now, in light of what had been found, it felt chilling. For investigators, this was the first solid lead that connected a possible suspect to the bay where baby Grace had been found. After weeks of frustration, the tide of the investigation was finally beginning to turn. There was no sign of the blue plastic container. Who were the mysterious couple seen that day, and what had really happened out on the bay? Investigators launched an all-out search to find them. "We conducted surveillance across 4 different communities," one agent explained. "We were trying to locate the vehicle that the fishermen described. But despite their efforts, the vehicle never surfaced. Each dead end only deepened the urgency to find the couple before the trail went cold. A new opportunity arose when a candlelight memorial was organized in Galveston to honor baby Grace. Investigators saw it as a chance to draw the unknown suspects out into the open. They knew that in many cases, those responsible for a crime sometimes returned to the scene or, in this case, might appear among the mourners. Could the people who committed this terrible act show up? One detective asked. Absolutely. The FBI and local law enforcement quietly positioned themselves among the crowd, watching for anyone who might appear nervous or overly interested in the ceremony. One of the fishermen who had originally reported seeing the couple was also there, ready to help identify them if they appeared. It wasn't long before Sergeant Mike Barry noticed something unusual. In the crowd stood a woman whose behavior immediately caught his attention. There was just something about her, Barry recalled later. Her demeanor stood out. She seemed very focused on the vigil, almost fixated. Barry discreetly approached the fisherman and asked if the woman resembled the one he had seen on the boat. The fisherman studied her for a moment, then said he thought it could very well be the same woman. Investigators quietly began to prepare. The plan was to follow her once the vigil ended and record her license plate number. But before they could move into position, the woman slipped away, disappearing into the night without a trace. Was she the same woman the fisherman had seen? Could she be baby Grace's killer? The questions hung heavy in the air. Agents knew they had to find her, and soon. No stone was going to be left unturned, one investigator said. We were determined to find out who this little girl was, no matter what it took. By the 7th of November, 2007, 9 days after the body of the unidentified toddler was found, authorities were still working tirelessly, chasing every possible lead. The investigation had become a grueling cycle of hope and disappointment. It felt like a roller coaster, one detective admitted. You'd get your hopes up thinking you were close, then hit another dead end. But we just kept going, staying steady, following every path that might lead us to her name. Investigators were drowning in leads, more than 300 inches total, but not a single one was leading anywhere. As each promising tip fell apart, a chilling realization began to set in. We started to suspect there was a darker reason no one was coming forward, one agent admitted. If nobody was looking for her, maybe it was because the person responsible for her death was a family member. It wasn't an easy thought to face, but experience told them it was possible. When a mother kills her child, another investigator explained. She often disposes of the body in water, but it could also have been a boyfriend or the child's father. The working theory shifted. Maybe baby Grace hadn't been a stranger's victim after all. Maybe her own parents had killed her. Meanwhile, agents were still desperate to find the mysterious woman spotted by the fishermen, the one seen taking a blue container out into the bay and returning without it. She had later appeared at the candlelight vigil for baby Grace, only to vanish before investigators could question her. For weeks, agents pursued that lead relentlessly, believing it might finally unlock the truth. "We thought it was our strongest lead," one investigator said. But despite extensive searches, she never resurfaced. Eventually, they began to consider another possibility. What if the mysterious couple hadn't been involved in the murder at all? Perhaps they had simply stumbled upon the container, taken it home thinking it was lost fishing gear, and then, after discovering what was inside, panicked and returned it to the water. Even as that theory developed, the investigation continued to feel like a race against time. The team knew that somewhere, someone had to know this little girl. More than 500 miles away, in Mentor, Ohio, a woman named Cheryl Sawyers, 47, was browsing the internet when she came across a story about baby Grace. At first, it was the details, not the face, that caught her attention. The article described the child's clothing: a pink top, a skirt, and purple tennis shoes. Cheryl froze. The outfit sounded painfully familiar. She had bought those exact clothes months earlier for her 2-year-old granddaughter, Riley Ann. It wasn't just the composite sketch, Cheryl later said. Sure, the drawing looked like her. She had the same curly blonde hair, but it was really the clothes. I recognized every piece because I bought them for her myself. Cheryl hadn't seen Riley in months. Her granddaughter had been living with her until a bitter custody dispute broke out between Cheryl's son, Robert, and Riley's mother, Kimberly Trenery. Then, without warning, Kimberly had vanished, taking Riley with her. Now, as Cheryl stared at the photo of baby Grace, a cold realization began to creep in. She had to know the truth. "They just up and left," Cheryl Sawyers later said. "We didn't even know about it. We didn't even know Kim had moved." It wasn't until later that Cheryl learned the truth. Kimberly Trenery, her granddaughter Riley's mother, had married a man named Royce Ziegler and moved with him and Riley to Texas. Cheryl had gone to their old home on Tall Oaks Drive to pick up her granddaughter one day, only to find the house completely empty. Now, as she scrolled through the online news reports about baby Grace, one detail stopped her cold. The little girl's body had been found in Galveston, Texas, near Houston, the same area where Kim and Riley had recently moved. Her heart raced. She didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside her. Finally, she picked up the phone and called the Baby Grace hotline. "Baby Grace hotline," the operator answered. "Please," Cheryl said, trying to steady her voice. "I need someone to check on my granddaughter." She explained what she knew, urging investigators to perform a welfare check on the little girl she hadn't seen in months. On November 10th, officers were dispatched to the Ziegler's home, the place Riley had last lived with her mother, Kim, and stepfather, Royce Ziegler. While investigators were there, Royce pulled into the driveway. Calmly, he introduced himself and explained that Riley was no longer with them. "My wife and I are moving in with my parents," he said. When asked directly about Riley, Royce claimed that Ohio Child Protective Services CPS had taken custody of her due to allegations of sexual abuse. His story immediately raised red flags. Kimberly later confirmed the same version over the phone and even faxed a letter as supposed proof. But to the experienced investigators on the case, something about the explanation didn't sit right. The problem, one officer recalled, was that if CPS had really taken Riley, it would have been done by Texas CPS, not Ohio. It didn't make any sense. To verify, authorities contacted Ohio CPS directly. The response was clear and immediate. They had never taken custody of any child named Riley, nor had they sent any such letter. That was the moment investigators' concern turned to alarm. Once we confirmed the story was false, one agent said, we started to zero in. We needed to know exactly where that little girl was. The momentum shifted quickly. Investigators ordered DNA samples from Kimberly to compare against the remains of baby Grace. But for those who knew Kim personally, the idea that she could harm her daughter seemed unthinkable. I never saw her raise a hand to Riley, said Riley's father, Robert Sawyers. She was a good mom. I didn't believe she'd hurt her. I just thought maybe she was hiding Riley because she didn't want us to see her. Yet deep down, investigators feared the truth might be far worse, that baby Grace wasn't a stranger's child at all, but little Riley Ann Sawyers, a 2-year-old girl whose life had ended far too soon. Galveston, Texas. Months had passed since Cheryl Sawyers last saw her 2-year-old granddaughter, Riley Ann. Kimberly Traynor, Riley's mother, insisted that the child had been taken by Child Protective Services, but that claim was false. Riley remained missing, and the situation raised immediate concerns. Red flags went up for everyone involved. Where was Riley? And could the child now called Baby Grace actually be Riley Ann Sawyers? For Riley's father, Robert Sawyers, the idea that Kimberly could harm their daughter was unimaginable. She was wonderful with Riley, he recalled. She was a great mother. Robert first met Kimberly in 2004, when he was still in high school. Quiet and intelligent, she had a reputation as a good student. She was searching for love, and her relationship with Robert quickly grew serious. When Kimberly discovered she was pregnant, she reacted with more excitement than Robert initially did. Riley Ann's birth brought immense joy to the family. Seeing Riley for the first time was overwhelming, Robert remembered. I felt like I was on cloud 9. I couldn't have been happier. By the time Riley was 3 months old, Kimberly and the baby had moved in with Robert and Cheryl. Overwhelmed by school and the responsibilities of new motherhood, Kimberly allowed Cheryl to take the lead in caring for Riley. Shopping trips became cherished moments, with Cheryl often asking Riley to choose her favorite items. Pink and purple dominated the little girl's wardrobe, a reflection of her youthful preferences. As time passed, the young couple's relationship began to drift. While Kimberly did care for Riley, she often seemed distracted, spending long periods on her computer. Eventually, Robert moved out, though he continued to see Riley regularly. She was a daddy's girl, he said. We would play outside in the snow during winter, and in summer, I'd take her to the park whenever I wasn't working. Meanwhile, Kimberly remained in Cheryl's home, but struggled with loneliness and a desire for romance. She soon began an intense online relationship with Royce Ziegler, a man who lived more than 1,000 miles away in Texas. She told me she had a boyfriend, Cheryl recalled. I asked, who? And when she said he was in Texas, I thought, how does that even work? By 2007, Kimberly had moved out of Cheryl's house, leaving a growing distance between her, Riley, and her family. Cheryl had seen her granddaughter Riley almost every day. The little girl had been a bright, constant presence in her life, laughing, playing, and filling the house with energy. Then, suddenly, she was gone. I didn't know where they were, Cheryl later said quietly. I didn't know how my granddaughter was. That was the hardest part. After having her there every day for 2 years, she just wasn't there anymore. In time, Cheryl discovered that Kim, Riley's mother, had left Ohio without telling anyone. She had taken Riley to Texas and secretly married her online boyfriend, Royce Ziegler. That move, once just confusing, would soon seem chilling in hindsight. It was the last time Cheryl would ever see her granddaughter alive. 4 weeks after the discovery of baby Grace's body, Sergeant Mike Berry and Lieutenant Tom Hansen received an urgent call. Kimberly Ziegler and her attorney had arrived at the sheriff's office, agreeing to provide a DNA sample to help confirm whether baby Grace was, in fact, Riley Ann Sawyers. Investigators expected a routine appointment, a simple cheek swab, but once inside the interview room, Kim began to talk, and what she said would change everything. Riley is baby Grace, she confessed. Riley is baby Grace. I'm positive. I know it. When pressed to explain, Kim began to unravel a horrifying story, one that she claimed began with her husband, Royce Ziegler. According to Kim, Royce often lost patience with the toddler and insisted that Kim was not strict enough. "Discipline works when I'm home," he told her. "When it's just you and Riley, you're not doing it right." On July 25th, Royce allegedly decided to stay home from work so he could help discipline Riley himself. Kim recalled how his anger escalated as the 2-year-old cried and refused to obey. He said, "We need to break her," Kim told investigators. That day turned into a nightmare. Kim described how Royce shouted at Riley, struck her with a belt, and forced her face into a pillow to muffle her screams. As the hours passed, Kim claimed she joined in, desperate to please her husband and terrified of defying him. "He wanted me to put her head under water," Kim admitted, "and I did it. I hit her too, because that's what he was doing." It just went on and on. Eventually, the couple stopped long enough to give Riley some Tylenol and ice her bruises. In that brief moment, the little girl looked up and whispered 3 words that would haunt Kim forever. "I love you." When investigators asked who Riley had said it to, Kim's voice broke. "She said it to me," she answered softly. Then, after a pause, she added, "I think she said it to him, too." The abuse continued until Riley finally collapsed. "I could feel her going cold," Kimberly recalled. They had tried to warm her with a heating pad, believing the child was simply chilled from ice, but Riley had died in Kimberly's arms. Kimberly later admitted that neither she nor Royce Ziegler ever considered calling 911. Instead, they drove to a store in search of black garbage bags, a blue plastic container, and other supplies. In a chilling attempt to destroy evidence, they bathed Riley in bleach before placing her body in the container. For nearly 2 months, her body remained in a garage, left to decompose in the oppressive summer heat. One night, he decided we needed to get rid of it, Kimberly said. Royce had originally wanted to leave the container where it was, but the stench had become unbearable. "I was an emotional wreck because I knew my daughter was dead in that box, in that storage shed," she admitted. Ultimately, they drove under the cover of darkness to Galveston and dumped Riley's body off a bridge. Investigators were left in disbelief at Kimberly's account. How could a mother stand by while her child suffered such a fate? "Most people would fight to the end for their child," one officer said. "This shows a level of contempt for human life that is almost impossible to comprehend. It's critical to verify her story quickly." Following her confession, Kimberly warned authorities that Royce had attempted suicide just days earlier. He had left a note claiming responsibility for Riley's death. "We didn't want to see him hurt himself or anyone else," she explained. On the 23rd of November 2007, Kimberly stunned investigators by detailing how she and Royce Ziegler had brutally beaten Riley to death. She described how the child had lost control of her legs, how Royce had tried to help her stand, and how she ultimately could not. Kimberly emphasized that Royce remained suicidal, claiming he had confessed in writing. Agents rushed to Royce's home and were relieved to find him alive and willing to speak. But once in custody, he gave a very different account. "I was in bed the entire time," Royce insisted. According to him, he had been asleep when he heard Kimberly yelling at Riley. Only when he emerged from the bedroom did he realize the severity of the child's condition. Royce placed the blame squarely on Kimberly, leaving investigators to determine who was telling the truth. FBI agents and local investigators combed through the couple's home and a nearby storage unit for evidence. There, they discovered the suicide note in which Royce appeared to take responsibility for Riley's murder, adding yet another layer of complexity to an already horrifying case. The FBI evidence lab confirmed that Royce had indeed written the note, and analysts also uncovered a list of rules he had created for 2-year-old Riley Ann. These rules were enforced through abusive disciplining sessions that far exceeded any acceptable form of punishment for a child. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Royce, prosecutors chose to charge both him and Kimberly with capital murder. Investigators emphasized that Kimberly never intervened, never called 911, and never attempted to protect her daughter. "She participated," one prosecutor noted. Cheryl and Robert Sawyers were left emotionally shattered by her involvement. "I couldn't even describe what I felt," Robert said. I was numb to the core. It didn't even feel like me anymore. The case left many in disbelief. I was absolutely shocked, Cheryl admitted. I still don't understand why she allowed it to happen. It never would have crossed my mind that a baby could be in danger from her. Experts later suggested that Kimberly allowed the abuse because she feared losing Royce. He had moved her to a new life, offering the illusion of security and love, and she was willing to do anything to maintain it, even if it meant letting Riley suffer. In the eyes of investigators, that did not lessen her guilt. Any two people willing to torture a child all day long are monsters, one official said. Even after the horrors of Riley's death, Kimberly gave birth to her and Royce's son while awaiting trial. Royce had suggested that law enforcement might be more lenient with a pregnant woman. However, the jury remained unmoved. On the 2nd of February 2009, Kimberly was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison. Roy Ziegler was convicted later that year and received life without the possibility of parole. Their son is now being cared for by relatives. In memory of Riley, the Galveston island where her body was found was renamed Riley's Island. She was laid to rest in her hometown of Mentor, Ohio, with Sergeant Mike Berry, FBI Special Agent Don Gay, and 2 other investigators serving as pallbearers. I was deeply touched and honored to carry her, Agent Gay said. It felt like closure, knowing Riley is now in a better place. It was sad, but at least we could give her back to her grandmother and provide her a proper burial. Robert Sawyers has since remarried and has 2 sons, yet he continues to grieve for Riley. We spent 2 wonderful years together, but it never felt long enough. She was a sweetheart. I loved her to death, and no one could have loved her more than me and my other boys, he reflected. Cheryl Sawyers still feels the loss of her only granddaughter deeply. She now distributes bracelets bearing Riley's name to raise awareness about child abuse. I don't want anyone to go through what we went through, she said. No child should ever endure what Riley endured. By sharing her story, I hope young parents will think twice before harming their children.